Hey, it's Auden Schendler, Senior Vice President of Sustainability at Aspen Skiing Company, and it's the Aspen Skiing Company podcast. I've got Michael Miracle here, who is Director of Community Engagement. Hi, Michael.
Hey.
Hey, so I just chatted with Quincy Shannon of Denver, and it was amazing. Quincy's a leader in the Black community there. He's a dean of students at a middle school, and he's involved with a church. He's a preacher's the wrong word. He gives sermons. He's the youth leader in that church. This guy has been to Standing Rock. He came to Snowmass and ended up on a balloon ride. It was awesome.
Yeah, what'd you guys talk about?
Well, we talked about his experiences when he was 19, getting pepper sprayed by the police in Denver and handcuffed and thrown in a paddy wagon. We talked about Ski Noir, where he brings Black youth up skiing. And this is a guy who skied himself since he was 3.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think even though I cut you out of this recording because it was just he and I, and that'll never happen again, I think you'll enjoy it.
I can't wait to hear it.
Quincy, is that you?
Hey, how you doing today?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing well. It's good to hear from you.
Good to hear your voice. And we've got about an hour here. This is the Aspen Skiing Company podcast. And truth is, I was looking at the things I wanted to talk about with you, and we could go for 2 or 3 hours, but we'll stop at 3 because you have a dance class. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually work in a middle school, and to try to help some of our students who are quarantined and not stay-at-home orders right now, we put together some after-school clubs in a virtual space. And so today I'm going to be joining some 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and they're going to attempt to teach me a TikTok dance, and they are really excited. I am not as much, but if it gets them to be excited about school, I will do it. So yeah, today I have a hard stop time, but if what we're discussing bleeds after that and, we want to do another one, I am more than welcome to find ways to continue the conversation because I am excited about different ways that we will be able to converse together.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely do that. So just to be clear, you are not teaching people how to dance. You are being taught.
Today I am being taught. They are. Last week I came into the club and they were laughing about TikTok, and I was like, "Oh, we could do anything that you guys can do." And they said, "Challenge on!" And now they want to teach me. So, after today, we may have a pretty embarrassing video.
Good. Well, we'll repost it as appropriate.
Sounds good.
Good. Hey, so I want to start with a little bit about who you are, what you do, but also a little bit of your history. I know you went to East High School in Denver, and just what you care about and what you do, and then we can roll into various things from there.
Not a problem. Well, my name is Quincy Shannon. Most people just call me Q. I'm a Denver native. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. I grew up in the Park Hill neighborhood, which is a neighborhood in Denver Central, kind of near the City Park neighborhood. And I'm thankful to have grown up there when Stapleton Airport was still an airport in the heart of the city. So I have vivid memories of our house shaking as planes were landing. I have vivid memories of sitting on the grass, looking up, trying to either see what airline it was that was landing or making up different stories with my friends of where we thought people were going. And I think it sparked my love for traveling, just having a chance to see that. I went to Denver East High School, but before that, I actually had a chance to go to both Denver public schools and to Catholic schools, so I had a chance to see both. I was the last of the optional busing in Colorado, so a little bit before me, there was forced busing within Denver, Colorado because of how redlining and segregation had broken up the district, and students had to get on buses. And then by the time that I was in elementary school, it was an option. So although Stedman Elementary School was literally a block away from my school, I got on a bus every morning and rode for about 35 minutes to Bromwell Elementary. It was a part of an integrated model of schooling. And then from there, had a chance to go to Catholic school. And I'm really thankful for that upbringing because it showed the value of diversity in education. I got to see people from different neighborhoods, different cultures, different backgrounds, and learn a little bit about what their expectations were, why we could or could not still be friends, and some of those different realities. Had a great time at East High School, and then I went to Lincoln University, which is a historically Black college and university located in Jefferson City, Missouri, which is the capital of Missouri. I'm actually a third-generation graduate from my family, so my grandmother went there in the 30s. My mother and my father met there in the 70s, and I had a chance to go there. So when we think about just education in my family, it's always been a very, very important thing. And from there, I had a chance to get a master's degree from Virginia Union University, in which I got a master's in theology, and I have a master's in divinity. So I actually am a bivocational minister. Some days I work in a church at New Hope Baptist Church. I am the youth pastor. And then other days I have a chance to be a dean of students at Denver School of Science and Technology, working with middle schoolers. That's
not a bad job in terms of meaning and interest.
No, they actually align very well. So I work with kids in different capacities and different times in their lives. And I think one helps me with the other. And, you know, the kids know when I'm in school, respect is something that I will always give and I always require. But I think the same thing bleeds into church, and folks know that as holy as we are and as we're learning things, I'm always going to give people from different walks of lives the same respect that I would want if I was in their shoes.
And that sort of brings us to how we know each other. I'm gonna set that up and then let you roll with it. But we, Aspen Skiing Company, brought you and some colleagues who are leaders in the Denver Black community to Aspen Snowmass, and we wanted to introduce you to the area and get to know you. And the vision was that maybe we can expand where we recruit for employees into the Denver market, and maybe we could mutually benefit each other by providing jobs and getting a different perspective and worldview, and open up Aspen Snowmass further than it has been. I want to hear about Ski Noir, your ski effort, but let's start with your visit here, and I'm gonna start with a specific part, which was that you had done a tour during the day. We looked at our hydro plant. You talked to our retail guy. You got to know some other people, and we had some beers at the Limelight with Mike Kaplan and Jonathan Ballou, head of the ski school, and Sue Way, who runs kids programs, and you kind of paused the conversation, and let's start it there.
Yeah, no problem. So I and a cohort of people in a partnership between the Denver Urban League Young Professionals and Ski Noir. The Denver Urban League Young Professionals is an auxiliary group of the Urban League, which was created in the early 1910, 1911 timeframe around giving African Americans access to jobs and housing. And Ski Noir is a ski organization that was born in my living room 2 years ago, and we had an opportunity to partner with a chance of helping to give access to a different demographic of people to come up to Aspen to receive jobs and to just get plugged into a different community. And while there, we had an amazing tour where we got to see so many different things, from the hydroelectric dam to just being able to see a sky coaster, talking with different people in the different capacities of jobs that people would potentially be working in. And the idea on the itinerary was just for us to meet for drinks as kind of like the CEO, Mike, was going to be there. A few other individuals were going to be there from your top leadership and leadership in other areas, and to be able to meet with our cohort. And I thought it was important for us to, instead of just socializing in a general capacity, pause the conversation to have a very real and frank dialogue around why we're there, what we believe we represent, and what hopefully the partnership could entail. And what I started that conversation off by saying was, It's not enough for us to just do a press release, say that we were there. Each of our organizations signs off on the release and we go along our very, regular lives as if the moment never happened. But that where we are in life right now is that we need to have meaningful interactions and meaningful conversation. And that this was an opportunity for us who represent many different communities, whether we look at that from a socioeconomic perspective, whether we look at that from the different genders that were there, whether we look at that from sexual orientation and or race and ethnicity, and that we had a chance to bond with each other by talking about why we were there, what some of our experiences are that led us to skiing, snowboarding, or wanting to have joy in the mountains. And I thought it was very important for us to be able to pause just the social gathering and be able to bond on a different level. And what I found was that many of us learned something about the other that showed how our communities are a lot more alike than they are different.
Yeah, I mean, that was a kind of profound moment, certainly for me, and I think everyone there. And one of the questions that was asked was, why are you here? That was asked of us, and I think you got a variety of answers. But do you have takeaways from that conversation or thoughts about it? Further thoughts?
Yeah, it was interesting. So to paint the picture for those who weren't there, that it was, between, 14 and maybe 20 people roughly, depending on people coming in and coming out and those on the offset who are listening. And we had a group of individuals just sharing, how did we even get to Aspen, or what was their story? And the very profound thing that stood out to me in many different areas was that the access and accessibility for someone to come to Aspen wasn't often on our own fruition by ourselves. And that oftentimes it was somebody else who was exposed. So we had, Mike, a young individual there, who said that he originally came up for the X Games, had no idea what Aspen would be, just knew that he liked the X Games. Once he got there, felt like it was a welcoming community and wanted to stay. And then as we were hearing different people's stories of how they got into Aspen, it was very exciting to hear just all the different access points that got people to the community, and how the community in itself was something that kept people or gave people the desire to want to stay. And I can say, even for myself, in the limited time that I was there, that very same community was welcoming to me enough so that I'm even on a podcast right now, right? Where it was like wanting to be able to keep the relationship going because of how welcoming it felt in that room. But also, as we were on the tour, different people in the community, how welcoming they extended themselves to be.
Right. And I want to hear about your balloon ride, which was sort of the peak of that welcomingness, I think. But before we get to that, one of the things you said that I found striking, you said, look, we as people of color don't even know if we can feel safe in this specific community. And you said, I can't always get gas when I try to get gas in Colorado. And that is such a hard thing for, I think, the white community to understand what that even means and what it looks like.
Yeah, it's a very real reality, sadly, even in 2020, that there are still communities that are not welcoming, and there are still places that it's dangerous to drive down the street or to simply stop. And that, having a flat tire in one community could mean somebody stopping to help you, but it can also mean somebody stopping to hang you. And that we are very much so not too far removed from a time where in this country, people with skin the complexion of mine had to travel with something called a green book. And that green book would tell them places in the South that were welcoming, places in the South that they could stop, places that they would be able to either sleep or be able to get food, gas. And that green book became an atlas for survival. And the very real reality is that even in Colorado, as progressive as we may feel at times, that there are still some very strong nooks and crannies of individuals who have that same hate, who have that same perception that because somebody's skin or because somebody doesn't look the way they did or doesn't come from the same community that they come from, that they are then a threat and need to be neutralized. And I'm reminded that, there's a book called The Black Klansmen about an individual who infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan, but that was written about an individual not in Alabama, not in Mississippi, but in Colorado Springs.
Right.
And that there's militia groups here in Colorado, in Castle Rock, or even some on the western slopes who are still promoting this message of hate. And so when I'm traveling, I am very mindful of the fact that although I'm a college-educated, peaceful person who tries my best to be an asset to my community instead of someone who takes away, that I know that because of how I look, because of how somebody perceives my whatever it is that they perceive, that I could potentially be in danger. And so I'm always looking for different cues when I stop of, is this a welcoming place? Is this a friendly place? How did people look at me when I'm walking down the street? How many people crossed the street when they saw me walking? How many women, grabbed their purses a little bit tighter when they saw me? How many men changed positions to make sure that I wasn't going to be closer to their ladies as I'm walking towards them? There's so many different subtle and sometimes overt cues that we give all the time based off our perception of a person. And in Aspen, it was definitely something that I was mindful of as well.
And so did you just say you're going to observe that, or did you observe how people treated you? Did you see specific instances of people treating you in certain ways or not here?
Yeah, I would say the very real reality is I don't have the luxury not to.
Right.
My survival is based off of those subtle cues of, if I let my guard down, unfortunately, it could realistically mean my life or livelihood. And so whether it's conscious or subconscious, I'm always taking in those cues in the different places that I go. And I can say on a strong majority of the places that I went while in Aspen and Snowmass were very welcoming. There was an ice cream shop that you all recommended that we go to in downtown Aspen. And when we walked in, there was a Black Lives Matter poster in there, and people in there were very friendly. There was a police officer who stopped and asked us if we needed any directions, and he was very welcoming and friendly, and I didn't have any negative thoughts around that. And then there were also some individuals who did have some of those cues and, based off of their perceptions, may have given off some, the biases in which they bring. And that's life. We'll never go to a perfect utopia, but I think it's something that hopefully with our experience and sharing with you all, that others can at least be mindful that it still happens, and that, there is not a luxury of just walking down the street carefree in my world. I always have to be mindful of how I'm dressed. I always have to be mindful of how I'm acting, what I'm portraying, which communities are receiving me, but also which communities do I bring with me everywhere that I go. And that because of those different realities, the mountains then become scary for some individuals, which is why I know a large amount of people who grew up in Colorado who have never been to the mountains.
So in a way, as I mentioned when we were having beers at the Limelight, your story is a first person version of Ta-Nehisi Coates' story in Between the World and Me, which was our community read. And in a sense, you're saying, well, not in a sense, you need a behavioral green book as well. How you respond to inquiry from the police if you're pulled over, how you act on the street so that you aren't perceived as threatening. And this sense of what it's like to be Black in America was something I think you portrayed really well. And when I brought up Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, you were like, oh man, I would be happy to come in the community and talk about it. So tell me your thoughts on that book and its meaning.
I think what it did for so many was it allowed, in a literary sense, for others to see a world through someone else's eyes. And as I was reading through the very powerful book of Between the World and Me, and being able to see, even though we come from different communities, right? Tyler Coast from the East Coast, me from Colorado, there were similarities of things that we had to deal with. And one thing that I want to point out that you said was, with the interactions with the police and how those interactions go. I've talked to several family members, and we all have similar rites of passages of when you get pulled over by the police, your do's and your don'ts. I will never leave the car on. I will never leave the music on. I will never open up the glove compartment without explaining to them that I'm going into the glove compartment. I will always put the keys on the roof of the car, even if it's cold outside or no matter how warm it is, because I need the officer to not feel me as a threat. Depending on the vehicle that I'm in, I'm always going to roll down the window so that there's no suspicion that there's something in the back seat that can be perceived as a threat. These are all things that I have to go through as a checklist, even if I'm only getting pulled over because, my tire was a half an inch closer to the white line than somebody else's, and I may not have done any other crime or any other, grievance besides that. But I'm worried about how am I going to make it home? What do I need to do to pacify this situation in such a way that somebody else feels comfortable enough to allow me to live? And so as we were reading through, the very profound text of Between the World and Me, there are so many different similarities of what he has as he's talking about his teenage son, as he's talking about racist violence that has been woven into the American culture and really brings this bridge between what it's like in Baltimore, but that similarity of what dealt with in the East Coast is very similar to what Black people have to deal with all throughout the United States. And so having a chance to come up and build some of those bridges or to talk more about that firsthand experience, I think is not only important, but it helps to understand authors like James Baldwin or Toni Morrison or so many other of the writers that influenced Ta-Nehisi Coates in some of the writing and works that he did.
And you had you've been dealing with police issues your whole life. When you were 19 in 2004, didn't you have a particularly jarring experience?
Yeah, so I'll say the one thing that I'll say right before the 2004 incident was that the first time that I had a gun pointed at me was when I was 9 years old. I was riding a bike in the community, and an officer didn't hear a response from somebody next to me the way that he wanted to hear it. And so he pulled a gun on all of us and allowed us to know that he was the person in power. And he actually, utilizing that power, put us in the backseat of his car and drove us to a different neighborhood and told us to get out. And at the time, gangs were a very real reality in Denver. And the neighborhood he took us to was an opposite area to the neighborhood that I grew up in. And I don't know what he was expecting to happen, but I don't know how many people know what it feels like to have your power taken and stripped away from you. I say that to bleed into the incident that happened in 2004. So I had just finished my first year of college and I was excited. I went to school for broadcast journalism and had learned different camera tricks to put in your mind in this 03, 04 reality. This is before camera phones were on phones at the time. You still had disposable cameras. And so somebody having a video camera was a big deal, especially coming from the neighborhood that I come from. And so we had been downtown. We had been filming and recording and showing different people what downtown it felt like. And we're just excited about those things. And on the weekend before I was getting ready to go back to school, me and 4 friends of mine went out to a nightclub in that area that was an 18 and up place that you could get in. We were there. There was an incident that happened across the street unrelated to anybody that I was with. The police started clearing the parking lot. And one of the young ladies that had ridden to the area with us was not in the car yet. And so we asked the first officer, we see her in eyesight, sir. She's walking our direction. Can we just wait a second to get her in? He said, no problem. And as we were waiting for her to come to the car, about 3 seconds, 4 seconds later, it was within the breath of 2 breaths. Another officer came and said, didn't he tell you to clear? And before we could respond or answer, he started macing the vehicle. One of my friends who was in the passenger seat got out and took off running, scared for his life. My best friend at the time, Ramon Hernandez, just started clenching the steering wheel. Between that time, he would be maced 9 different times before the incident was over because the officer continuously pepper sprayed and maced the car. After the 3rd macing, I got out of the vehicle and I was engaging with the officer trying to find out what we could do to make it out of the situation. And when it determined that I was really fearful, I called 911. And 911 emergency picked up. I explained to them where we were at, what was going on. She was asking if I could see a badge number. When I walked over to the officer to try to figure out what his badge number was, he said that I was becoming a big pain in his, and he used an explicit language at that point. He did a pressure point on my palm that pulled my 3 fingers back. It flipped my entire body on my forehead and my face. I ended up having a laceration under my eye on my cheek that went down to my mouth. He then handcuffed my right arm to my left ankle and drugged me to a paddy wagon, stood me up one more time, maced me again, and threw me in the paddy wagon, which would become my first trip to jail. Within that experience, for some reason, the paperwork was different, so I had to stay in a little bit longer than I normally would. And I learned from a very real reality how lucky I was to survive, as we're thinking about others who were in similar situations who did not get away with their lives. One thing that I remember very vividly was when we went to court for the situation, the officer tried to brand and peg me as a gang member, saying that I was using multiple explicit language, that he was fearful for his life because of how I was trying to excite everybody around me. And the 2 charges that I got was exciting a riot and disobeying a lawful order. Because when he maced me and told me to stay still, I didn't. And after they threw me to the ground, people around me got upset and they said that I excited the riot. Thankfully, I had the tape from 911, and the tape was clear, in which you could hear what I was saying and you can hear what the officer was saying. And what my lawyer at the time did is he told the DA, if I play this, will you do the right thing? And they came in, and on the tape, you can hear what the officer is saying and what I was saying, and they weren't matching up to what the officer had said had happened. And thankfully, the charges were dropped, and I was able to go on about my day. But I didn't leave from that situation unscarred. I learned very real that if I would not have had a 911 tape to say my side of the story, I could have been branded as whatever that officer wanted me to be at that time. And that when I think about my life and the trajectory of things that happened after that moment, college may not have been something that I graduated from. The career that I have may not be something that I have. The family members and the individuals that I've been able to impact may not be a reality, because I could have been locked in a system in the prison industrial complex based off of somebody else's perception of what they wanted me to be at that time. And so that is really why I'm involved in so of the many different angles that I'm in, is because I know very realistically what that feels like to have officers do what they did to me. And the shame of what I feel sometimes because I survived, knowing that others did not.
Because in a way, you were the early example or early version of the videotape, phone tape.
This is before we have, camera phones. So, when I was growing up, what was done, and you may or may not have somebody who can prove it. And just by luck, by saving grace, that 911 tape became my version of a camera phone, my version of a documented recording of what happened that wasn't something that someone could say I altered, because I had no power or possession of it. And so as we're transitioning into where we are now, where so much is being highlighted either on video recordings or on audio recordings or on people posting on social media, I very much see value in that, because I know what my situation or scenario would have been like without it. Mind you, Auden, I went to school with Paul Childs, who was a student at East High School, who was killed by the Denver police because he had mental disabilities and some other things that were in place that were not allowed him to answer the question the way they wanted it to be answered, and they took his life. So I know very realistically that making it out of the situation the way that I did, although I was bruised, although I was beat, although I was left bloody, was a lot better than not making it out at all.
In some ways, it was a miracle, and you're paying that back.
Yeah.
You do a lot of traveling around, going to events. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so because of that situation and others, I realized that my voice was powerful and that my presence was something that I would have an opportunity to share, not only the experiences that I had, but to help others, whether it's organizing an event, whether it's participating in a direct action, whether it's just observing and talking, that going to different communities became my way of trying to pay back the life that I was granted in that moment or throughout different moments of my life realistically. And so when Ferguson first happened and Michael Brown was killed, my family on my father's side is from St. Louis, Missouri. I have a cousin who has a barber shop blocks away from downtown Ferguson where, the police station and the fire station are. I have a grandmother who has a house around the corner from where Michael Brown was killed and right next to where the Quick Trip was burning. And I remember looking on the TV and seeing what was being perceived as riots and being worried about my family and being worried about the livelihood of friends that I would see when I would come home for visits or go out there for family reunions. And so a group of friends and myself, we got in a vehicle and we drove to Ferguson in the height of all of what was being characterized as riots. And what we were greeted with was a community that was upset, a community that was grieving, a community that was saying that over the years there's been systemic racism that does so many different things. And if you look up Missouri, you'll get to see that there are like different municipalities that have different laws and rules within a 10-block, radius. You can go through 7 or 8 different municipalities. And so in one group, they may say that driving this way is illegal. In the other group, they say it is legal. And it's a lot that happens for those communities. And so we got involved in some of the direct actions in Ferguson. We were there when the National Guard was deployed, and we actually saw, Humvees and military individuals who had machine guns who were in full regalia looking at us. We were there during the Black Friday direct actions in which just walking in a mall made them perceive that we were going to loot, riot, and steal. None of those things which we did, but because of that fear, they would close the gates down on multiple malls and they would call the police and we would be surrounded. And so going to Ferguson really opened my eyes about what being involved in direct actions was like outside of my community, and what it meant to put my body on the line. We were shot with rubber bullets. We had pepper spray thrown at us. We understood that it was a very real reality that we could be arrested. We had numbers that were put on our arms with magic marker to make sure that we wouldn't forget a number if we needed to call for law services or some type of help if we got incarcerated in some fashion or form. And so Ferguson was a very eye-opening reality. And from there, I have tried to be involved in different communities and different places that my heart felt like I should be there. So I had a chance to go to Standing Rock twice, which was in North Dakota, South Dakota, and helping some of our indigenous communities as they were fighting for water is life, and really being able to see how dangerous what they were dealing with was, but also how powerful it was. And when we got on the reservation, there were over 500 tribes represented of people who answered a national call from all over the country and were sleeping in teepees and sleeping in tents and sleeping on the ground with nothing even covering them, but felt like they needed to be there. And that sounds good until you think about how cold it truly was. And to see that sacrifice of individuals there made me want to come back. And we were sadly there one of the days when they opened fire hoses on some of those who were encamped there trying to freeze them out. We were there when people were trying to go up Turtle Hill to protect it, which was where the burial grounds were, and they were trying to dig through their burial grounds. And as people tried to protect their area, we got to see, them being pepper sprayed, them being shot at with different things. We had a plane that never stopped going above us, that when we got home, there were pictures on my phone that I never took, so that we got to experience some very real realities. So I've had a chance to travel to different places, just most recently got back from New York and participated in a direct action there. But it's not as much so as me going these places. It's the lessons that I'm learning of how similar some of our realities are in ways that we can take those experiences and not just brag that we were there, but use them hopefully to teach both ourselves, those around us, how to be better.
So you've had this life of protest and challenge and growing up in Denver, and yet somehow you're a skier, right? Didn't you say you've been skiing since you were 3?
Yes, sir. I've been skiing since I was 3.
Where did you start?
So Copper Mountain was the first mountain that I ever skied on. And thankfully, I'm a second generation skier. So my mother was a part of a program called the Eskimos growing up. And so she had a good understanding of what skiing is. She was a part of a group that's called the National Brotherhood of Skiers that started in the early 70s.
Right. We know them. They've been here, and they were supposed to be here this year, actually.
Yeah, they were supposed to come for the National Black Ski Summit to Aspen this year. The first ever ski summit was actually held in Aspen, so you guys have a very strong place in our heart with that. And so with my mom skiing and her growing up skiing, it was something that I had a chance to be a part of. And so I have vivid memories of being younger than I probably should have been, going to the summit and just watching a culture of people come together on the hill for fun, for racing, and so many different memories that I had that made me want to recreate that for my daughter, who's 11, made me want to recreate that for friends of mine who have never been to the mountains. And so we created something called Ski Noir. And really it was about trying to recapture some of those experiences that I had growing up and finding ways that we could repackage them, brand them, and make them better for this next generation. And so a part of our mission of what we're going to do once COVID is over, is find ways to to get a new group of people to the mountains and to give them that cultural immersion so that we're providing transportation to a hill for them to get free ski lessons. And it's something that my mom did for 27 years in a program she helped to run called Ski for Kids. And that it introduced so many kids from around the neighborhood to skiing. And so that Ski for Kids program is something that we're taking is Ski for Kids 2.0 with Ski Noir, where we're making relationships with different mountains, with different places, so that we can have opportunities to bring young kids up, put them on a bus, give them free ski lessons, free equipment, and find ways that we can hopefully make another generation of people love this sport that I love so much, that I get excited during winter time. And if I get a snow day at school, instead of me wanting to stay home, I'm trying to map to see, okay, I know it's a snow day here. How bad are the roads? Can I still make it up to the closest mountains? Will I still be able to get on the backcountry if I can't make it to an actual resort? Is my friend with a snowmobile available so that we could at least get close to somewhere else? And so I'm hoping to recreate that same passion for another generation of people so that they can be introduced to the mountains and find out that a lot of the fears that we have are things that we can overcome, and that there's opportunities for us to come together and to just have fun.
And that, I think, one of my concerns has been, okay, we bring some people to the mountain who don't have the means, and that's their only experience. And obviously we're all trying to change that permanently. But when your group visited, I felt even that trip, there was value in coming to the mountains for the opportunity for renewal and transition and epiphany in some ways, that even experiencing it one time is amazing. And I feel like your balloon ride was a little bit of that. I have not been up in a balloon, but tell us the story of, start with, you're wandering around the lobby of the Limelight. This is Friday night in Snowmass, Colorado.
Yeah, so it actually starts that morning, Friday morning, actually, before the evening. And it was, we had seen that there was going to be on our itinerary of some of the optional events that we were up there. It said that there was going to be the Snowmass Balloon Festival, and that there was an opportunity if we wanted to wake up really early. I think it was 5:30 was the call time, that we could get down and watch the balloons launch. And I've always said I wanted to go in a hot air balloon. I've seen them in different places, but just never had the opportunity or the access to really make it happen. And so I was excited about waking up. So even though we had driven up the night before and gotten in kind of late, I was like, we're going to get up. And about 3 of us in our group were able to wake up, get dressed, and make it down in time to watch these balloons launch. But unfortunately, the weather would not permit. And, it was cold that morning, and it was it was very cloudy. And from my understanding, they had told the balloon folks they weren't going to be able to launch. And so we were like looking disappointed that it couldn't happen. And we're like, darn, we missed something that could have been really transformative to see. And so that evening, without even knowing so, we were going to run to the city to grab something from the store. And as we were driving, we were seeing something that they called the night glow, and that they had several balloons on the side of the road in Snowmass, not leaving the ground, but they were, as it was getting to become dark, they were just, doing the fire of the hot air balloon, and you were able to see what the balloon looked like with the skies that were starting to turn dark. And I got so excited that I told my friends and the people that I was with, pull over. I got to get some pictures. I got to see it. And so I was taking pictures, and they were like, Q, we got to get to the store. Like, this is Aspen Snowmass. These stores are not 24 hours. We have to make it to the store before it closes. And I was like, just leave me. I'll be here. I just want to be thoroughly immersed in this experience and this opportunity. And so they did. They left me, and me and one of the people that I were with stayed, and my battery was on 9%. And I was like, I am going to take as many pictures before it dies as possible. And so I was walking around, but because of COVID-19, we weren't really able to get as close as we may have wanted to all of the balloons. And so across the street, I noticed that there was a balloon that had the Colorado flag wrapped around it as its symbol. And as I was kind of looking and taking pictures with it, one of the guys was very welcoming and was like, hey, do you like what you see? Do you have any questions? And that simple invite allowed me to walk over and engage in a conversation with him. And we were able to talk about all of the curiosity and questions that I had around hot air ballooning. What is it? What does it take to make the balloon go up? How does it come down? How do you steer? How many people can fit in it? With, like anything that I could think of. I was just a little kid in a school asking as many questions, and he graciously answered most of them. And then his family came over, and they actually handed me like a sticker with the hot air balloon and the Colorado flag. And they told me their family's history and that their father got them into hot air ballooning, and that he was one of the first people to actually do the Snowmass Festival. And it was just a really enjoyable experience. And I thoroughly thank them for taking about 45 minutes to an hour to just talk to a young kid who knew nothing about it. And so they told me the next morning that, if weather permitted, that they would try to launch. And I said, okay, I'm going to wake up because I want to be able to see what I missed the day before. And I did. I woke up early, and I was walking. And as I was seeing, all of the different balloons in the air, the main thing that I was looking for was that same Colorado balloon, because those people were so nice and so welcoming that I just wanted to be able to see them take off and see them in the air. And there were no promises or, anything about anything more than just being able to see a balloon take off. And so as I was getting to where the balloons were taking off, and because of all of the COVID restrictions, was kept kind of on a perimeter away from where everything was off, as the brother of the guy who is the pilot was taking off, he saw, I was like, Q, and, was welcoming. But as they were saying hi to me, the balloon was taking off, and I was taking pictures and was like, wow, that was so cool. I got to see a hot air balloon go up in the air, and was like kind of sitting there with the family. And he told me that two of the young ladies that were in high school, that they were getting ready to go up next, and that he was going to bring it down. And I was like, is there any way I can help? Like, do you need help holding it down, or holding a strap, or holding a rope, or, whatever ways that I can be effective and helpful at the time. And so when the balloon came down, they handed me something, and I held it down as the two young ladies got in and took pictures, and we laughed, and I was sitting there with the family just enjoying that time. And as the guy was bringing it down again for the young ladies to get off, me and another one of the helpers came over to kind of hold it down as the young ladies were getting off. And he said, Q, would you like to go up? And, I, without hesitation, yes, sir, I would love to go up. And it was an amazing opportunity where, this relationship was born off of just being inquisitive and asking questions without asking, demanding, or even thinking that it was an option for me to be able to go on the balloon. And this person that was a stranger the day before offering up something that he had access and accessibility to, something that he had knowledge for, and being able to share that experience with me was powerful. And so we went up in the air. We got up to 11,000 feet. I was able to take a panoramic view of Snowmass and take a whole bunch of pictures. And then the wind blew us away from where we wanted to land. And so we found ourselves over where a wedding was happening. We actually dropped the balloon down behind the bride and the groom, and they took wedding pictures with him and I. And then we went back in the air and came in a lady's backyard and came down. And she was so excited that she came out and took pictures. And then we went back in the air and finally were able to get closer to the landing site, and I was able to get off. And when it was all said and done, I had a chance to be in the balloon for a little bit over an hour, and left from that experience not only knowing more about hot air ballooning, but knowing the value of just putting yourself in a position to have somebody else give you opportunity. And I'm so very thankful for it.
In a place where you know were welcomed to experience that opportunity. You sort of mainlined into balloon culture out of nowhere.
Yeah, I've learned. I now know what a sport hot air balloon looks like, and you know, if we have a 1 to 4 person one, the different ways that people were opening up their chutes and the ways that they should or should not be. Like, I feel so much more at home that now when I see a hot air balloon in the air, there's all these questions I'm going to be asking myself of, are they doing this thing that I learned, or are they doing this thing that I learned? And so it was truly a great experience, and I am really, really thankful for it.
Still, I'm going to caution you not to try that on your own in Denver yet. You're not an expert yet.
I was going to say, I've been looking at just regular balloons. If I could do kind of like up and put, 9 balloons together that are really small, maybe I'll get, no.
It's been done. It's been done with a lawn chair.
No, my fear of heights will stop me from any of those things.
Nice.
But,
do you remember the name of the guy?
I'm actually, let me look right now, because I would love to be able to highlight that. I have a picture. I took a picture of the side of the balloon that had his father's name on it. And as you're setting up the next question, I can have the answer by the time.
Okay, yeah, or we'll get it as part of something we post, because we probably know him. So we're running out of time here, but one of the things that we've committed to do is stay in touch and bring some of our executive team to Denver and see 5 Points and some other things there. But the thing that got my attention was the possibility that we might be able to go out for some soul food. Will you tell me a little bit about what might be in my future?
Yes, sir. I can definitely. And it was Jim Carter and Bill Carter. They were the individuals. Bill Carter was one of the brothers who was helping. And their father was the one who first did it. So if you know Bill Carter, Jim Carter, or the Carter brothers and family, just let them know first and foremost how thankful I am that they allowed me to do that. Within saying that, so we have so much culture here in Denver, Colorado that many are not aware of. Madam C.J. Walker, who was one of the first Black millionaires, she started and did some of her work here. Frederick Douglass, an abolitionist, his sons had a mortuary here. And so we want to be able to show some of the individuals who are coming down from Aspen, the proud history and culture that we have. But we also have a woman by the name of Mona. And Mona has owned several restaurants around Denver, one being a pig ear stand. But most famously, she has a soul food restaurant called Welton Street Cafe. And her daughter, Fatima, and I went to high school together. And so I stop by there as often as I can, and I'm able to eat the food that my grandmother cooked as I was growing up. And so one of the things that I'm excited to offer to the group who is going to be coming down from Aspen is a chance not only to eat at this historic restaurant, but be able to talk to one of the pioneers of soul food in Denver, Colorado, and be able to learn more about her. We also have a family who owns a restaurant called Boney's, which is a barbecue restaurant, and they have a location in the heart of Denver, Colorado, who I've also spoken with, and that they're going to have an opportunity to provide some lunch at one of these chances. So we're really just going to thoroughly immerse you all in the culture that gives me pride, that makes me smile, that I'm excited to share with somebody else, while also giving you some history and then make some introduction of some relevant people still in the community now that I think will be powerful, that the same experience that I got when I was in Aspen, of a welcoming community that gave me first-time experiences, that we can provide that for you all as you come down and have a welcoming experience with people who are going to embrace and love on you, and hopefully give you guys an experience that makes you want to come back.
And maybe a hot air balloon if we're lucky.
Hey, I mean, if I can find something.
All right. Well, Q, it's been such a pleasure talking to you now and getting to know you, and I look forward to more of it. And I really hope you don't embarrass yourself too badly in your dance lesson now.
What I found with middle schoolers is the more embarrassing that it is, the better for them, because they're going to laugh, they're going to chuckle. But if I'm able to put myself on the line to be embarrassed, it allows them to feel more comfortable and not feel so self-conscious that somebody's watching them. So it's probably going to be pretty embarrassing. It's probably going to be pretty silly, but it's also going to be something that gets them excited. And I leave that with those who will be listening to this, is that sometimes your sacrifice and being willing to do something for the sake of others really opens up and allows them to be all that they can be. And whether it's the hot air balloon ride of somebody who had the access and accessibility to give me an opportunity, whether it's those of you all who are in Aspen and Snowmass who welcomed our group up and gave us a chance to walk in places we never walked, or to ride on things we never rode on, that there is power in just being accessible and being willing. And so my hope for all who listen to this is that you find ways in your own personal context to do those same things for others. It doesn't take a lot sometimes for us to just do something so somebody else can have access and accessibility. And that when we start to see those things, we start to see the world change.
There you have it. Quincy Shannon, man of many skills, Denver, Colorado. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, Quincy. That was awesome.
No problem. You guys have a good one.
Okay, take care, man.
All right, bye.
So, Michael, that was me talking to Quincy Shannon of Denver. And the guy's like a Renaissance man.
Yeah, that was fascinating. Thank you for getting him on the podcast. I would have never heard a perspective like his if not for that.
Yeah, it was interesting as we talked a little bit about Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me, and he's like first person guy living that book. So that book meant a ton to him, and it made it relatable for us, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, we as a society at large, desperately need to be seeking these stories out and hearing them, understanding them, so we can help get us on the right path as a country.
And on a less serious note, but an interesting note, if we can get some of our executive team down to Denver, there is a place called the Welton Street Cafe, run by a woman named Mona, who used to run a pig's ear stand. So we could get some soul food like you have never seen.
I'm in.
All right, I'll see you there.